Hi, folks. This is Mark by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Wanted to read an article in just a bit about a possible weapons compact between Russia and North Korea. And it says that it has caused foreign concerns. Hmm. What about the foreign concerns that have been caused by the weapons compact between the member nations of NATO? Do those concerns not matter? Certainly, NATO is a much more formidable force than anything that Russia and North Korea might do. Now, ideally, I think it would be best if there were no weapons compacts at all, if we had no need for that, if there were good relations between nations, if we lived in a world based on revolutionary socialism or communism, and the notion of one nation attacking another nation or other nations would be inconceivable. But that is not the world that we live in. We live in a world of tremendous conflict, disunity, and fragmentation. What Roy Bhaskar referred to as demi-reality, his translation of the Sanskrit word Maya, illusion. He also translated demi-reality or Maya as splitting. I like the splitting translation. It's simple and straightforward. And so, while we may be witnessing perhaps another era in that splitting, I am concerned that the focus on Russia and North Korea does not include a focus on NATO. I mean, NATO is a much bigger threat, has been a much bigger threat, has toppled countries. It was NATO, after all, behind multiple wars in the last 20 years, Iraq, Afghanistan. So why all this talk about concerns about a Russian North Korean military pact? I know, because it is not the West. And when it's the West, it's okay. But when it's not the West, when it's Russia, when it's North Korea, that is a different story because Russia and North Korea are perceived as posing a threat to NATO. And I suppose they do. But so what? So what? If we live in a world which is unipolar, which is basically what happened after the end of the Cold War, the rise of a unipolar world where basically there was only one dominant power. That was the United States. The United States and the empire, which was basically manifested by NATO. Well, it appears that we are about to see, or possibly about to see, a threat to that single-handed unipolar world. And I am happy for that. Anything which may tear down or threaten the domination of the empire is good for me. Now, does that mean again that I support increased militarization by anyone? No, of course not. I would like it if there were no militarization. Again, I would like it if we were living in a world of communism or revolutionary socialism. But I am not a dreamer. I am not an idealist. I am a realist. And as a realist, I look at the world as it is. And in that world, I see one dominant power with nobody really able to challenge it. Russia tries on occasion, China tries on occasion, but they are really not able to match the strength of NATO. They simply can't. I mean, it was the strength of the US and NATO which brought down the entire Soviet Union. The US and NATO made the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact countries bankrupt. They bankrupted the Warsaw Pact and the Soviet Union. And so why is Russia? Why is North Korea? Why are they talking about forming a common pact? It is clear because they feel threatened. And feeling threatened by the US, by NATO, is something which makes perfect sense to me. We live in a world dominated by the US. The US is the head of the beast of the first world. And the first world is the dominant sector of the capitalist world system. And there is simply no way to get around that. The capitalist world system is in charge. I used to wonder, back when Immanuel Wallerstein used that term originally, he used it at a time when there was both a Western world and an Eastern world, meaning a world dominated by the US and a world dominated by the former Soviet Union. So did it really make sense to use the term capitalist world system? Well, we very quickly got our answer. Immanuel Wallerstein was brilliant. He saw the power of the United States. He saw the ability of the US and its allies to bring down the Soviet Union. And that is precisely what happened. And so this new possible military alliance between Russia and North Korea, I honestly do not see what the big deal is. I mean, there has been trading already going on between those two countries, and not only between them, between many other countries and Russia, and many other countries and North Korea. So why this sudden fuss about Russia and North Korea? The answer is simple, because from a Western perspective, from an Amerocentric and a Eurocentric perspective, it is those two countries which are feared the most, with the possible exception of mainland China. But even mainland China, I don't think is feared quite as much on a political level as Russia and North Korea. So let me put on my spectacles and read for you all or most of this article. I think it is a very well written piece. It explains exactly what is happening right now and why there is this concern. This article is from NPR, more specifically from KNPR, which of course is an affiliate of NPR. The article is titled "Concerns Mount as Russia and North Korea Commit to a Mutual Defense Pact." It was updated today, June 20th, 2024. And at the top of the article is a photo of Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin walking through a lobby with a large number of people following them in the background. Here is the article. Dateline, Seoul, South Korea. Foreign governments express concern about a treaty between Russia and North Korea that commits the two countries to providing military assistance to each other if either of them is invaded. Pause. That sounds like an imitation of what NATO does. And NATO is based on the provisions established by the United Nations. And so, therefore, this pact, if it is eventually signed, will be the same thing. It will be in complete accord with the United Nations. It's exactly the same idea. If either country is invaded, they pledge to stand up and fight against the aggressor. Precisely the same thing that NATO is committed to doing, but has only done once, and that was in the United States on 9/11. And there really was nothing particular to fight for, except, I guess, in Afghanistan. But that was kind of a stretch, obviously, as all of us know now. Continuing, Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un signed the treaty Wednesday during Putin's visit to Pyongyang. The treaty upgrades the country's relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership, that is in quotes. It specifies that if either side goes to war after being invaded, the other side shall provide military and other assistance with all means in its possession without delay, according to a treaty text published Thursday by North Korean state media. For all intents and purposes, this is an alliance pact, says Artyom Lukin, a political scientist at Far Eastern Federal University in Vladivostok, Russia. It might mean that Russia and North Korea would fight in each other's military conflicts. Lukin argues that it's no accident that the treaty uses similar language to a 1961 pact between the Soviet Union and North Korea. I think it was done in order to show that Moscow and Kim Jong-un are again politically and militarily allied like they were during the Cold War, he says. The treaty adds to the 1961 pact several preconditions for providing military assistance. The aid must be in line with Russian and North Korean national laws and Article 51 of the United Nations Charter, which affirms the right of individual or collective self-defense of member nations under attack. Pause again. Again, it is that same Article 51 of the UN Charter which was the basis for NATO. The same exact part of the Charter. Exactly the same. Sorry for repeating myself. Back to the article. Whatever obligations and preconditions the treaty contains, experts note, the key factor will be how the two nations decide to interpret and implement the pact. North Korea is already accused of sending Russia munitions to use in its war in Ukraine in exchange for food, fuel, and military technology. Both countries publicly deny such a swap, but the treaty could serve to justify it and embolden them to do even more. Putin and Kim seem ready to ramp up the stakes and take risks, says Lukin. I would say that nothing is off the table. For example, if Pyongyang and Moscow agree on it, it's possible that the North Korean military may dispatch soldiers to fight battles for Russia in Ukraine, recruit volunteers, or send mercenaries to earn foreign currency, says Cheng Yong-suk, a researcher at Seoul National University's Institute for Peace and unification studies. Pause there. That is a unit, in case you didn't know, of the Unification Church, the Moonies. That's right. That is an agency of the Moonies, the Institute for Peace and Unification Studies. I wonder why the author of this article did not point that out. Well, I did. Continuing. Or if the war in Ukraine goes badly for Russia, Chang says, it's conceivable for North Korea to launch a military provocation to open a second front in Northeast Asia to distract the military power and attention of the US and the West. As for North Korea, they already have an estimated 50 nuclear warheads, and Lukin and other experts believe Russia is unwilling to share high-level nuclear and military technology. The problem is that even secondary technologies can significantly improve North Korea's weapons development, Chang notes, and the impact on military balance in the Korean peninsula can be huge. The treaty also says that Russia and North Korea will oppose unilateral compulsory measures, that is in quotes, a reference to international sanctions against both countries. North Korea for its nuclear and missile programs, and Russia for its invasion of Ukraine. Russia used to support international sanctions against North Korea, but more recently, Moscow has blocked UN Security Council efforts to tighten sanctions on Pyongyang, and in March vetoed the extension of a mandate for a UN panel that monitors implementation of UN sanctions on North Korea. In an article published by North Korea's Rodong Sinmun newspaper and on the Kremlin's website, Putin wrote, "We will develop alternative trade and mutual settlements mechanisms not controlled by the West, not controlled by the US, in other words. This could be a throwback to a Cold War era financial settlement system," says Hong Min, a North Korea expert at the Korea Institute for National Unification, a Seoul based government think tank. If, for example, North Korea provides weapons, he says, the value of those provisions will be converted to a ruble amount, and North Korea would be paid back in kind with food. Essentially, this is a barter system that has assessed value in rubles. Japan expressed grave concern about the pact, while NATO Secretary General Hans Stoltenberg commented that the agreement showed authoritarian powers were aligning. Pause. And who is the authoritarian power? Is the US not an authoritarian power? Are many of the other countries in NATO also not authoritarian powers? I like the way the term authoritarian powers is used here so selectively to exclude countries like the US, countries like Canada, countries like the UK, and so on. But of course, that is to be expected. Continuing, South Korea condemned the treaty, of course, and said it would reconsider its policy of refraining from sending arms directly to Ukraine instead of backfiling stockpiles of US and Polish munitions. China, which has been North Korea's only real ally since the end of the Cold War, reacted today to the Putin-Kim summit, calling it a bilateral manner. which it is. While Putin and Kim met in Pyongyang, Chinese diplomats and military officials were holding talks in Seoul. This followed a trilateral summit with the leaders of Japan and South Korea as China tried to stabilize ties with its neighbors, despite rivalry with their ally, the US. Some experts see the Putin-Kim summit as a comparatively bigger win for Kim, in other words, for Kim, as opposed to Putin. Putin's focus is on building a system for securing the military assistance Russia urgently needs right now, says Hong Min, whereas North Korea is focused on showing off their alliance as much as possible. From North Korea's point of view, adds Chang Yong-suk, they're being treated as a global actor, albeit as Russia's junior partner. That's a huge political and diplomatic achievement, he adds, and it may be the kind of outcome Kim Jong-un wanted the most and finds most satisfying. On Thursday, Putin went to visit Vietnam, where he signed at least a dozen deals with the country in another step to bolster Russia's relations in Asia. And that is the end of the article. And so, again, I think that we are seeing Western hypocrisy at work as usual. The hypocrisy of the empire which dominates the capitalist world system. That is nothing to be surprised at, but it is somewhat concerning only if the West decides to do anything about it. Will they? I doubt it. It is very unlikely, I think, that the US and its allies will take any military action against either Russia or North Korea, both of which, like the US, are nuclear-armed countries. Very unlikely, unless there is a provocation. And even then, I would think that the attempt would be to let cooler heads prevail. One, of course, can never know. The world that we live in right now is so destabilized, so confusing, that no one can really predict with any certainty what will happen next week, less tomorrow. For the time being, this has been Mark, by Mark A. Foster, Ph.D., for the Institute for Dialectical Meta-Realism. Have a pleasant day and an even better day tomorrow.